Thomas here with Much Props, going to give you another how-to video. Today I am once again building something from the Star Wars franchise. My wife and I have been going back through all the movies and watching them in chronological order, and as we were going through The Mandalorian, I think it's about season 3, when he needs a robot repaired and they bring him to this tiny little workshop. It's like a little door, like shin level, and he talks to this alien who then tells him, yeah, I can repair it, but you should just get a new robot. My wife thought they were adorable, which usually in my mind means I need to build that. So today I am going to build an Anzelin, one of those things, out of some EVA foam and make a little diorama that can be plastered on a wall. Let's get to building. In Season 3, Episode 1, titled The Apostate, the Mandalorian asks for help to repair a droid for a mission, and he is directed to a tiny workshop in Navarro with these small creatures called Aslan, who are described as the best droidsmiths in the galaxy. None are specifically named, but the main character seems an awful lot to look like the famous Babu Frick. So that is what I'm going with as a reference. I drew up a workshop door based on a couple of images and drew an image of Babu as a reference. This pattern is pretty simple, with the outer door being the most complex of the pieces. It has a couple of layers that I'll explain in the cover letter of the pattern, and you'll see how I cut it out for tracing in this clip. Each part has a foam thickness on it. Trace the template onto your material of choice and cut it out. I'm using EVA foam. Here I am cutting down the door into its parts. I tried to color the perimeter of the pieces to make it make a little more sense. Hopefully leaving this part of the clip in the video will also help. After hundreds of build videos, sometimes I forget that my handmade templates may not be as clear to others as it is to myself. Time to cut out the parts. I like to make an initial rough cut to get the parts to a more manageable size. I do my best to pull through the material at a perpendicular position to the foam in as smooth a pull as possible. This will eliminate the need for cleanup later of the parts. A sharp blade can also help quite a bit. On straight sections, I typically pull the hobby knife through and leave the material stationary. To go smoothly around curves, usually I will rotate the piece as I pull through with the blade. I have put out at least one build a week for the past 7 years, so I make it look super easy. It is from loads of practice, and the sped up editing here makes it look extremely fast and easy. Take your time and be careful with sharp blades. A loss in focus usually leads to stupid injuries that could be avoided by paying attention. Here are the parts laid out and how they stack on each other. You'll work towards the middle. I put down contact cement in the areas where the parts will join each other, some on the front and part of the back of most pieces. You'll let the contact set up for a few minutes. When it's no longer wet to the touch, then you can join the parts together. I sand areas flush that would be harder to get to later when fully joined. The construction of this build may have taken me an hour or so, including the recording bits you see here and setup. To glue the door into the frame, it can be a little tricky because contact cement will have a strong connection with barely touching the other glued up part. You could add a piece of paper to act as a barrier to help you position and then pull the paper away once it's in place. You could also position the parts while they're still wet and then just push them together once the glue is set up. Or you could do what I am doing and just remember that foam is flexible. Bend parts out of the way and then smush them back together when they are in the right spot. This would be a great build to use other materials with, as it's just layers of flat surfaces to make the dimensionality to the prop. To save a little contact cement when joining the frame to the base, I mark the part out and glue within those parameters. Two coats of Plastidip. The door and the creature have a gray base, so I'm going to spray paint them to make it easier in the next steps. So for the door, it's a darker color than I need it to be, and I need to add a little light brown tint to the surface. I also need to add rust and chips to the edges to really weather up the areas. This will make the door seem more like it's been in the desert conditions of Navarro. I dry brush on light shades of gray and then make passes with mixes of brown to dirty it up. I also do a couple of washes in the cracks by watering down the same acrylic paint and pushing it into the crevices. To finish off the door, I hit the edges of the frame and the door in random areas with a burnt sienna and umber to give the appearance of a rusted edge where the paint has chipped away. You could totally leave the doorway black if you wanted to and plop the character in the middle. It would be great contrast and make it easy to see. I wanted to add some more details behind him, but I didn't want to try and hand paint that Droidsmith workshop. So I did a Google search for the Anzalon workshop and printed it out. Added Mod Podge over the top of it to seal the paper, and now I just need to cut out the shape into my printout. All I did to find this shape was taped pieces of poster board together, tied along the perimeter. Cutting it in sections made it a lot easier than trying to eyeball it or trace it from over the top. I then taped that cutout to my printout and cut it out. Then I glued it down to the opening of the door. Eventually, I replaced this image with a blue tinted one because the character did not have enough contrast to stand out. This little guy took 4 times longer than the rest of the entire build put together. I have very large hands and struggle with painting little details. I could just Mod Podge a printout onto the cutout, but I wanted to challenge myself and get some more character painting practice in. I glob on a bunch of colors onto a disposable paper plate that I think I will use and slowly build up the layers of details. I started with roughly mixing grays to dab on to make an uneven splotchy skin tone on Babu. His belly, palms, and face area got a mix of white, pink, red, and tan to imitate my reference image. Then it was just a matter of laying down base layers of color for different parts and layering on details over it. I spent the better part of the day trying to get it how I wanted, maybe around 6 to 8 hours or so in total of paint time. It's at this point that I realize the color of my background is way too close to the color of my little dude, and I'm not about to repaint this guy, so I'm gonna replace the easier part. My initial idea was just to paint over the top with a thin layer of blue acrylic. This looks really splotchy because my background surface has the brush marks from the Mod Podge on it. Eventually, I just went back to my image on my computer, shifted the tint to a better shade of blue, and then glued it on top top of the old one. I left this bit in the video just to show that things don't always go to plan, and sometimes you may have to pivot in a project multiple times to get it closer to where you want it. Nobody's perfect. To attach my little guy to the build, I'm just going to super glue him into place in the middle of the doorway. I really like how well the tiny little painting turned out. Constantly push yourself to get better. It may not be perfect, but compared to my skill set 2 or 3 years ago, I have made some really big strides in my painting abilities. I wish painting videos got more views on my channel because it's a process that I really enjoy. My family's houses and my house are filled with paintings on every wall. I've run out of walls in my house and the walls of those around me. So in my reference image, Babu Frick is holding some tools. I thought it would be fun to build these things to add a little more dimensionality to the piece instead of just making them out of foam. I'm not going to try and be exact with it, just similar vibes. I have no idea what these tools are supposed to be, maybe some sort of futuristic welder or cutting torch. I'm going to piece it together from random screws, wires, tape, and other bits I have on hand. Once I have my parts super glued temporarily, I add another attachment method with some metal duct tape and add electrical tape for the grip. After they are kit bashed together, I glue them into his hands and add some watered down acrylic over the top to weather it. And with that, my little dude is done. I hope you enjoyed the build. And we are finished. Here is the end result. I like the way this thing turned out. It was something that happened pretty quickly. It's not extremely difficult in terms of complexity. It's flat shapes glued on top of each other. I did replace this background blue because it kind of made him stand out a little bit more. The yellowish color that's in the actual scenes, he blends in with everything, so I wanted him to stand out just a little bit more. But yeah, if you didn't want to have to hand paint this, you could print this and Mod Podge it onto the cutout also, and it would work. I just like to challenge myself a little bit and get some paint practice in there, here and there. And these little tools, on a photo, it looks like they're flat, but in reality, they're dimensional. They stick out from the actual deal. So all I gotta do is put some sticky tape on the back of this, slap it on a wall, and call it a day. Maybe I'll sneak it into her office and see if she notices. Maybe you will try and make one of these yourselves and impress your friends with your ability to see something from a movie, think it's adorable, and build it. Yeah. Maybe you'll get some, and inevitably, they're going to ask you, how'd you make that? You can give them one of these. Tell them, much props. Time to covertly go put this in her office. Peace out. If you enjoy what I do here on YouTube and want to see more builds like this one, please consider joining these awesome people listed here with me over on my Patreon to build a bigger, better, more creative community together.